As a knitter and spinner, I really love getting to know a new yarn or fibre, and so today I'm very excited that I get to do both. I have here some Zwartbles wool, which I got from a very local farm, just a couple of villages away. And I spent a very long time skirting it, sorting it all out, getting it as clean as I could. And I sent it off to a local mill and have had it prepared into carded sliver or sliver. I've heard it should be sliver, but I hear more people say sliver. I don't know. Which do you say if you know the term? So that's a carded preparation that is really good for woolen spinning. And so I am going to be trying out my long draw spinning with this, which is something I am not remotely practiced at. It's not something, I've tried a tiny bit of long draw before, but I've not really given it a proper go. And I'm also going to be trying out the yarn. Now here, it just looks black, but it's actually this gorgeous, rich, dark brown with just some really nice little lighter heathery bits, just to add a bit of visual texture. And I deliberately left some of those bits in the fleece when I was sorting it so that it would just like lift it up a little bit and give it more visual texture. And so now with these, I specified how they should be. I told the mill how I wanted them prepared and spun up. And so I already kind of have a bit of an idea of what I'd like to try doing with them. But I thought I would use this as a way to show you sort of when if I am working with a yarn company that has put out a new yarn, or if I buy a yarn that looks lovely and I don't yet know what I want to make with it, or if I'm sampling some new fibre, I'm just going to show my process for working out what project that thing wants to be, because I tend to take quite a few different things into consideration. So starting with the fibre, I will do a little sample spin first, and then while that is drying I can start swatching with the mill-spun yarn, and then afterwards I can try swatching with my hand-spun. And so this, as I said, is a carded preparation. It is fairly minimally processed, so it's been scoured and it has been run through a carder, but it hasn't been gilled. So gilling is the process that removes shorter fibres and begins to align those fibres into a more parallel preparation that would then be used for worsted spinning. So this yarn is a semi-worsted. It's been gilled but not combed. So the fibres are sort of mostly aligned, but not fully so. Whereas this, it hasn't been gilled yet. So all of the fibres, all of the wool staples are all in every direction. If I grab some, I've braided this up just so it doesn't get messed up, but I will get some of it unbraided to show you how it looks. So this is how the wool, the sliver comes. If I just find an end here. Now this bit is a bit that I know is a little bit skinnier than the main preparation. The mill warned me about this bit just because it's the end of the run where there was just less wool running through the machine as it got to the end. But you can see it's it's translucent. If I grab a bit from further down, that's how thick it usually is. And it's very crimpy and airy. I'm just taking a slightly arbitrary amount here and The braid that I was showing you earlier was a full 100 grams. This is just a random amount. And I think I will very loosely just wind it into a little nest around my hand just to keep it under control while I spin it. Now I'm obviously going to be starting off with the skinnier bit, but I imagine it'll take me a little while just to get a feel for it. So if I get my spinning wheel, I'm just going to start and see how we go. I like to have a double leader and then just sort of wedge my fibre in between the two strands to get started. Need a little bit more tension there so it pulls in. This is this wheel can be used as a double drive or single drive. I've got it set up as a double drive, and so tensioning it is quite straightforward. But it could be interesting getting used to a new method. Oh, the temptation is to go really fine again. I don't want to go really fine. Oh, I've gone all thin there. I'm going to join that bit back on. Now again, I'm not really setting out with a goal here other than to try something that approaches a long draw, because that is what is best for this really light, slightly chaotic fibre prep. But I've done a lot of very fine spinning recently, so it's going to be tempting to spin very fine again. And I don't want to do that. I'd like something a bit heavier. And it's really nice to see. Oh, this is good, this is good. I didn't think I was going to be able to spin it decently without, that bit's a bit thick there, without getting this hand involved. Because with a long backwards draw like this, ideally on a spinning wheel, the tension on the spinning wheel should be set up in a way that when you pull backwards, the fibre kind of drafts itself. Oh, we're going a bit thick and thin there. I think I'm going to sort of embrace it. And again, I am noticing as I'm unpeeling this from this nest here that it is coming off at slightly different thicknesses again, because this is an end bit where the wool was running out. I think that's looking quite nice. I think I might have been treadling a little bit too quickly for just while I'm getting used to this. So let's see how we go if I go a bit slower. So I'm going to continue to humble myself and try to get used to this, and I will come back to you when I am ready to ply into what is likely to be quite a lumpy yarn. Now, woolen spinning like this is always going to give a less consistent yarn than a short forward draw worsted spin. Oh, we're losing a bit there. And back on we go. Yes, woolen spinning tends to be less consistent in sort of thickness and texture. Yeah, I think I need a little bit more tension there. Join on once again. And then I will come back to you, hopefully, when I've got used to things a little bit more. Well, it's yarn. That's gone interestingly. And now, even though it is not best practice, I am going to wind this into a centre pull ball and then ply the ends together. Now, I say that a centre pull ball is not best practice. I have done it frequently. It really matters when you're being very particular about twist and creating a yarn that is consistent and predictable, which is absolutely not what we're doing here. This is trying out something completely new to me, and because of the way a centre pull ball works, one of the ends gets a lot more twist in it than the other, because one of the ends is working its way round and round the ball and one of them is coming straight out of the middle. Please forgive my squeaky ball winder. Cute little centre pull ball. Got an end coming off the inside and an end coming off the outside, and just get my wheel going again. I'm vaguely surprised that none of my singles snapped while I was winding it, but again, I have been used to very thin yarn recently, which this is not. This is likely to be all over the place. But I think it's going to be fun, because it'll be a yarn that really shows off the characteristics of the fleece. Now back in the opposite direction. Oh boy, this is uneven. So I've got my little sampler niddy noddy, which is a lovely bit of kit. Got this from someone on Etsy, I don't remember who, because it was years ago. But for small samples like this, it's really, really handy. I'm actually going to turn my wheel around just so that it's feeding straight off there. And I think I might have slightly over-plied this, but we shall see. I don't mind. Yeah, there's definitely a bit of spring back there. If I do this, it wants to twist up on itself. I do tend to ply quite vigorously. And I think having less twist than I usually do in the singles probably exacerbated that, but we shall see. And going through my hands, this doesn't seem as horrendously uneven as it did when I was plying it, but it's definitely not going to be a smooth or consistent yarn. Despite that, I'm looking forward to getting it swatched up, because I think it's kind of going to be lovely. There's so much air trapped in it. It's going to be really nice and bouncy. Right, that is that. I shall tie off these ends and get this soaked and thwacked, and we will come back to it when it's dry. So while the hand spun is drying, we can start swatching with the mill-spun yarn. So rather than breaking into one of my nice big 100-gram skeins, I have quite a few of these randomly sized smaller skeins, which were from the ends of cones. So when the mill were winding them into skeins, they won't do more than 2 splices per skein. So that means that they ended up with lots of little bits that they couldn't make into a whole skein. And so I've already balled up a couple of them, and we're going to get started with these. Now, for trying to work out the kind of thing that a yarn wants to be, I look at sort of the characteristics of it, both what the yarn is, like what ply it is. So this is a 3-ply DK weight. The 3-ply makes it really nice and round, and it's got quite a lot of spring to it because the fibre is really crimpy. Zwartbles is a wool that has a lot of crimp. And so the first thing I will do is a little stockinette swatch, because that will tell me what needle size I want to use. So I'm going to start with a 3.75. That's millimeters. For US, that is a size 5. And I will knit up a bit on that size needle and see how the fabric feels. It's essential to block it to see how the fabric's actually going to turn out. Sometimes you can tell when you've knitted a few rows, you can tell that the needle size just isn't right and you can try a different one. But yeah, again, I am working from the perspective of a designer, so I'm often designing with things and trying to work out what the yarn would be suitable for, rather than I have a pattern already in mind with a specified gauge and I am trying to make my my yarn and needles fit that. So this is working out what I think is going to make a nice fabric. So I am going to do a knitted cast on, because that's what I was taught. And I'm going to cast on about 24 stitches, I think. Maybe 26, we'll see how we go. And I use a knitted cast on as a standard, where I think a lot of people would use a long tail cast on. I've never really got on with the long tail cast on. Sometimes I use a tubular cast on or a backwards loop one for various purposes. Tubular for a nice stretchy, good looking edge. Got myself in a tangle here. And a backwards loop for if I don't need many stitches or they don't need much structure, for sort of underarms and things. But generally, I do like a knitted cast on. Right, that's 26 stitches. And I am just going to knit away in stockinette. And that will tell me how this yarn wants to behave as fabric. I'm not going to do garter stitch edges. I sometimes do a non-curling edge on swatches if I need to photograph them for sort of magazine submissions and things, for design submissions, because it means that they lie nice and flat. But for actually measuring your gauge, the garter stitch edges can distort your fabric slightly, because garter stitch has a different row and stitch gauge to stockinette. And so it can be a little bit misleading, especially if you are naughty and, like me, tend to make swatches that aren't quite big enough. I am actually attempting to do a properly sized swatch this time, because I'm showing what you should be doing. But often I will, if it's just for getting a feel of the fabric, I will do a slightly smaller one. Okay, so I've finished my little swatch here. I kept going on the length of it until I had at least 10 centimeters. And I think I have chosen the right needle size for this. I haven't blocked this yet. I'm going to do that next. And I can already tell. So you can see there's a lot of structure to this. It'll probably loosen up a little bit when I block it, but I think this is going to be really nice for decently structured knits. And the dark colour means that it's not going to be great for showing off like really fiddly detailed stitches, but I do think that it's going to be very nice for cables. And so knowing that I like how this is turning out, I'm going to try out some cables with another little bit of the yarn, because I think that will show it off really nicely. Yeah. So, cable swatch complete. I'm quite pleased with it. Again, it's fairly dark, so it's probably not going to show up very well, but on a whole garment or something, it would have more impact. Again, we're not blocked yet, so I've got my cable swatch and my stockinette swatch. We have the same number of stitches for each, so they're both 26 stitches. And you can hopefully see that the cable swatch is quite a bit narrower than the stockinette swatch, because the cables where the stitches cross over each other, that pulls the fabric in and makes it narrower. And so you'll often see that if you've got a pattern that goes from a non-cabled stitch to a cable and wants to preserve the same width of work, you will often have a change in stitch count there to accommodate that. So we shall block those. First, we are going to have a look at the hand-spun. So I have wound up my beautiful springy hand-spun into this cute little ball. You can see here that it's quite a bit thicker. It's also uneven, but I'm kind of okay with that. I did think, one of the things that has occurred to me is where I kept wanting to spin it thinner, I was using the smaller groove or whirl on my bobbin, which is what I have been using for spinning finer yarns. And I would like to experiment with using the other end of the bobbin, which has a larger whirl and therefore would have a smaller ratio between the whirl and on the bobbin and the whirl on the flyer, and hopefully would make it a little bit easier to draft out gently. So that's something I will be trying in the future. And just now, I have decided to use some 5mm needles because I think that's going to be roughly appropriate for this yarn. And I'm just going to knit some stockinette. Now you can see this is wonderfully bouncy, and I'm not going to cast on as many stitches as I did for the mill-spun yarn because I just have less of this yarn overall. And I'd like to have a good idea of what it looks like with a decent number of rows. So let's see. Oops. That's 14 stitches. I'll do 15 just for funsies. And I'm just going to do plain stockinette, and then we'll see how it looks. I'll do a few rows and assess my fabric. This is really fun to knit with. I think I did ply quite vigorously, which is something I tend to do, and I think I could have got away with a looser ply on this, but I do really like how the nice robust ply on it looks as a yarn, and I think it makes it a little bit stronger. That's enough rows to really see what's going on yet. But I think that's looking nice. Because I usually do assess in the first few rows. Like sometimes it can be very obvious when the needle size is just not right and you can see that the fabric is really gappy. But sometimes it can surprise you. I've had things that I've knitted on what felt like a way too big needle, but then when I blocked the swatch, the yarn really bloomed and filled up all of those little gaps. So sometimes it's worth persevering. So that's a little bit gappy in places, but also that'll be to do with the unevenness of the yarn. I think that's looking quite nice, so I'm going to persist with that. I'll finish off, I'll see. I'll aim for a square. If I end up running out of yarn before I get to a square, then we'll stop there. But then it might be that I have a tiny bit left over, which will be nice for comparison purposes. And so I shall come back to you when the swatch is ready and then we can block them all. This was very nice and speedy. So we have an approximate square. I think 5mm needles was the way to go. I could have gone down to maybe a 4.5 for something a little bit denser, but this is already like, again, we will see when it blocks up. But the fabric looks so much more even and nice and not slubby compared to what you'd expect from just seeing the yarn. And this is what I try to tell newbie spinners, because I'm counting this as basically newbie yarn because I've not really done long draw before. You will always be surprised by how nice your yarn is once you use it for something. It might not look perfect as yarn, but once it's turned into something, that can hide a lot of its perceived flaws. So we are going to take these three, give them a soak, put them on top of the radiator. I'm probably not going to pin them out or anything. I'm not going to weave in my ends because there is a good chance I will unravel these swatches at some point and use them for something. Because I don't have loads of this yarn and I would like to make something functional with the bits I have of it. Again, I've got lots that I have available for sale, but is not a huge quantity in the grand scheme of things, and so I would rather not keep too much for myself. But this, possibly even more structured than the commercially spun one, you can actually see the colour looks slightly different because of the way it takes the light. Like this has got so much more air in it and it's like the surface is much less smooth, and so that is making it look much lighter. So we'll see how they compare when they're all blocked up. So, stack of 3 swatches. I love them. I'm really, really pleased with how the fabric's turned out. The plain stockinette of the commercially spun, so the mill-spun yarn, I think 3.75mm needles was definitely the way to go. I really like how this fabric has turned out. And I think it also works nicely for the cables. And again, you know, I'm holding them up. You can kind of see through them a bit, but when they're on a garment or on a mitten, I think that would be really nice. And so with this, I think it's turned out to look slightly less crisp than I expected it to, which is no bad thing. I don't like too much of a crisp stitch definition, but it has softened up a bit. as it's been soaked and those stitches have kind of got used to where they're sitting. And then this one, okay, so my hunch was correct. I do think I could have done with going down to a 4.5mm needle on this one, because it's loosened up a bit and it's definitely a bit gappy. I think you could totally make something out of this and it would be lovely. It is quite trendy at the moment to knit at a fairly loose gauge, and I think for such a thick yarn as well, it would be really nice for a lightweight jumper to go over the top, and the gappiness would provide a bit of breathability, which especially in the UK where we just don't really have that cold winters, but I'm a very, very chilly person, and so I would be tempted to go a tiny bit denser on that, so knit it on a smaller needle size. But I think that's turned out to be a really lovely fabric, and I don't think you can see, like, there obviously are inconsistencies where the yarn was thicker or thinner, but it's filled out beautifully and I'm really, really pleased with it. So it does make me want to spin more of this and work on my long draw a bit more, because it just makes such a lovely, light, bouncy, happy yarn. So yeah, that is kind of my experience and review of my own yarn and fibre, which I'm just so proud to have brought into being. Like, the yarn is obviously being prepared at a mill. I can't remember if I mentioned, but it's the wonderful Rampersham Hill Mill in Dorset. So it's a really, really local yarn. I'm based in southwest Wiltshire. The farm that provided the wool is a couple of villages away, like 10 minutes drive. And then the mill is about an hour away from me, and that's across lots of country lanes. So it's really very, very local wool, and I'm just so excited about it. And I hope this was useful, even not relating to this wool, but just sort of seeing my approach for swatching and sampling, and how I take a look and get used to a new yarn or fibre. So I'd love to hear, do you do anything similarly or different when you're trying out something new? Do you have any specific things that you'll do, like, each time you try out a new yarn or fibre? Because I think we can get into little rituals, and I'd love to hear about how other people approach it. And do you think this yarn would be good for anything else? I'm tempted to see if it would work for, like, not a lightweight lace, but like quite a bold lace, like on the Zwartbles sweater, which is one I knitted years ago from an old issue of Pom Pom, or maybe Poet by Sari Nordland. Something like that, I think, with quite sort of structural lace, I think would be really good. So yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts, and if you want to see future videos, then please do subscribe to my channel, and I'll catch you next time. Bye bye.